Need a lift? Introducing our new protein bowls from Tudor's Biscuit World. Choose from our signature sausage bowl, packed with 39 grams of protein. Crispy bacon delivers a hearty 30. Or dig into our veggie bowl with 21. Every bowl starts with fluffy scrambled eggs, sauteed peppers, onions, and shredded cheese. With savory flavor in every bite. Each comes with a side of tangy picante sauce, starting at $4.99. Packed with protein, full of flavor. So go ahead, get your lift. Power your morning with Tudor's.
Friday nights, packed gymnasiums, hometown pride. These are the moments that bring our communities together. At Burke and Herbert, we're proud to be your local bank, supporting the schools, student athletes, families, and fans who make our neighborhoods stronger. Because when our communities succeed, we all do. From all of us at Burke and Herbert Bank, best of luck this season. Member FDIC, equal housing lender, and proud to provide you with service beyond expectations.
Welcome to the All Eers podcast, powered by HD Media.
All right, everyone, new edition here of the All Eers podcast, a West Virginia University sports-based podcast here at HD Media and the Charleston Gazette-Mail. As you've heard, and a common theme has been over these last couple of weeks has been shifting towards the gridiron on the football side of things with a little bit of a hint of the soccer side of things on the pitch. But we're mainly focusing on West Virginia University football as head coach Rich Rodriguez enters his second season and his second stint with the Mountaineers. So we're continuing along our coverage with that. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast to keep up to date with everything going on with this podcast. And you can go on our website, wvgazettemail.com, for all the latest WVU coverage on the print and digital side of things as well. You can follow us on social media. The links of those are in the description, along with the links to our Spotify and Apple Podcasts and YouTube links as well. So as we continue talking about Mountaineer football, I know we harp so much on the Mountaineers and the current team, but I feel oftentimes we forget collectively of what players or what former players are doing after they play in the gold and blue uniform. And one former player, I should say, is continuing along his coaching career and is now at Chattanooga in Tennessee for the Mocs, and that is former defensive lineman Julian Miller, who now joins us now on the All Ears podcast. Julian, welcome to the program.
Man, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, my man, as I mentioned, another year of coaching for you. I know you spent a little bit of time up at West Liberty for a few years, and now you're at Chattanooga coaching the Mocs. Just kind of give us a rundown. What's life been like for you in this coaching world, and how have you kind of adapted to it over these last couple of years?
Man, it's been fun, man. It's definitely been an ascending type of journey. I tell everybody, I didn't think when I decided to get into coaching that I would get to, I guess, experience all the different levels, within my career, I guess kind of just out of the gate. I had ended up deciding to get into coaching once my playing career professionally was over. And, the first opportunity I had ended up getting was an opportunity to coach high school football down in Florida, Ocala to be specific. And I got, my feet wet a little bit down there. And I really realized, like, you know what? I get to impact these young men's lives and also get to still be a part of the game. So, I coached high school ball for 3 years down there. Then I got an amazing opportunity to come back to WVU as a graduate assistant. I believe that was Dana Holgerson's last year. And it was an awesome, opportunity to work under Coach Gibson, Coach Gibby. Coach Bruce Tall had brought me back. He's a guy who actually recruited me out of high school. So I got to work with him in the defensive line that first year. And then when Coach Holgerson had left, was able to stay around for 2 more years with Coach Neil Brown and get to learn under him too as well. So, I got to do that for 3 years. And then, COVID hit, man. And, at the end of my, I guess, GA, time period, it was kind of tough finding a job. So there was an opportunity right down the road, man, up there at West Liberty. I interviewed, did a good job, ended up getting the job. And right there, to be honest with you, is where I really truly found myself, I would say, as a college coach per se. I got to spend 3 years there, 3 amazing years. Really got to learn, myself, how I wanted to coach, my coaching style, and ultimately led me to an opportunity here at Chattanooga, man. I ended up interviewing here a couple years ago. I'm going on year 3 here now, but, it's been a blessing, man, just being able to, kind of guide my journey through this whole process, man, and get to experience a lot of new things, get to meet a lot of these, different players and coaches. But man, I've been enjoying it, man. I really have been. So it's been awesome, man. It's been fun.
So I think this is your third, correct me if I'm wrong, your third season at Chattanooga, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So what's that like for you? I mean, you go from coaching at West Liberty and Concord, and now you're coaching at Chattanooga. What have these last couple of years meant for you, just being able to coach at Chattanooga, but also in the state of Tennessee as well?
Man, it's honestly been, pretty cool just kind of seeing the different dynamics, man. Like, there's a ton of, when you look at the bigger levels, there's a ton of similarities between, I would say, the culture of West Virginia football, like the big dogs, and like Tennessee, per se, those guys up there in Knoxville. And so when you get to this level, FCS level, man, there's a lot of just similarities of, smaller, like, college town type of feel, just everything that you kind of want in a program. And I've been enjoying that aspect of it. To be honest with you, man, Chattanooga, Tennessee is a beautiful place. If anybody's ever been or is able to, check it out, man, I would highly suggest it. I mean, you got the Tennessee River flowing through the city, beautiful mountains. It's a valley area. So our nickname is the Scenic City. So there's definitely a lot of, scenic, places around. It's just, it's amazing being here. But from a football aspect, man, it's definitely, you're in the South. So college football is king down here, man. So you got SEC, football around you, in our conference, the SoCon, man, they kind of call us the SEC of the FCS. So, any given week, you got good matchups here and there, but just the football is great down here. The people are great down here. And, like I said, there's a lot of similarities, like what you get when you're up there, just playing in that, the Mountain State.
Philosophically, how has your coaching dynamic changed and just how you approach coaching now that you enter another year in the coaching world?
Philosophically, I think each year, I gain obviously more experience, and, there's some things that you have high morals on and that you live on and that you kind of go back to. You have your non-negotiables, you have some things that you believe in truly, and you kind of stick to those. But as you go year to year, you learn what things work, what things don't. And you just kind of try to piece things off of that going into each year. I think probably over the past 4 years, I probably evolved the most. And that would be like my last year at West Liberty, and even, the past couple of years here. There's just been a lot of growth, and you sometimes got to realize the type of players that you're coaching, who can retain what and who's capable physically of doing certain things. And it ultimately molds you, as a coach year by year. So what I love about this side of the game as opposed to a player, each year you kind of got to approach it, totally differently. Whereas as a player, what you had to work on, the next step from you being, a sophomore to a junior or whatever it might be. Whereas with coaching, man, you're going year by year and trying to come up with different ways of doing certain things to kind of ultimately get the same results you want at the end of the day. So, I've had a really good experience of kind of being able to do that year in and year out.
You mentioned the retention side of things, and it's interesting you say that. How has the transfer portal in this new day and age of collegiate athletics affected you as a collegiate coach? Man,
it's definitely been, I would say, an experience to kind of go through, just being that, it just so happened I decided to get into coaching right in the middle of so much change in college football. The big thing, with the portal is just knowing that, 1 year your room could be full of 8 guys that you trust in, and then the next year you might only have 2 guys left from the year before that you trust in. I believe after my first year here, we wound up losing 19 out of 22 starters to the portal going into my second year. So, it was a big adjustment, man. And, I think out of my room this past year, I only lost one guy, thank goodness, but I was able to bring another guy in. And just going through that process, man, it's just wild to see kind of what college football is now. I look back to even my time playing up there in Morgantown. I had 3 different head coaches when I played. And I could only imagine what our teams might have looked like during those times. Had the portal been, what it is now. But when we talk about retention, like I talked about earlier, man, you're teaching certain guys a new scheme and everything like that. So you can't get too complicated with what it is you're trying to teach, because you never know what type of guys you're going to have around. Luckily this year for us at Chattanooga, we were able to retain a ton of guys. So we should, we're looking forward to, what this season's going to bring. But man, the transfer portal has been, it's definitely been an experience over the past couple of years, kind of seeing how, college football has changed between that, NIL, all these different things. So I know we're kind of like in the middle of all the change, but, I'm assuming, here soon, we'll kind of have like a concrete way of how I guess college football is going to be in the future.
I know this kind of aligns with the retention side of things, but the relationship side of things as well has probably been more so amplified in a realm of when you're trying to retain players. I think in large part, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, in large part, the relationships that you have with these players certainly have to be strong, and it has to have a very firm foundation to almost pitch to them, hey, we got a good relationship. Why go somewhere else to be reset again and have to create another relationship? So along that line, how have the relationship side of things kind of been parallel with the retention side of things, and just how do those align for you as a coach?
I mean, it's very, very important. It's a very important dynamic. It's a very important aspect of it. You might bring in a guy who you recruited, for 2 years out of high school in, and when you get him here, he ultimately ends up, being somewhat of a decent player early. And, at the end of the day, I mean, I'll speak more so too from this level, FCS. If a guy comes in, man, and they have any bit of a success, there's going to be possible opportunities for him, at the higher level. So though you have the relationship, unfortunately sometimes, and, especially right now, sometimes money talks. And, at the end of the day, some of these guys are going to wind up, if they're getting offered life-changing money, it's hard to try to keep that retention. But those relationships really do give you a chance. You want to make sure that, you got guys in your room who believe in what you're coaching, believe in, the positions that you're putting them in. But ultimately, man, I think we've kind of accepted the fact that, I mean, if you're doing a great job coaching a guy and getting him to his level of playing that he needs to be, especially coming from this level, ultimately he's going to wind up getting an opportunity, possibly at a bigger school. And, you kind of got to just use that as motivation and fuel for not just the kid, but even for yourself. You must be doing something right if a kid can go from, Chattanooga to, Auburn or something like that, So, but the relationships do matter, man, and ultimately you got to make sure that you keep a great relationship with your room. And I think that's just spread out throughout all of college football. If you can, get guys to believe and buy into what it is that you're doing and what you're selling, I think you got a better chance of retention more so than not.
Biggest area that you've had to grow as a coach dating back to whenever you first got your feet wet at West Virginia as a coach?
I would say to be honest with you, just being myself, finding, who I needed and wanted to be as a coach. I've been fortunate enough to be around a lot of good coaches, as a player, looking back, Coach Castile is a D coordinator, Coach Krlav, as a D-line coach. And so, my initial thoughts were to lean on what I learned from them. And, though I pick a couple things from what they taught me, I keep that with me and take that with me, but I also have to, ultimately mold myself into the type of coach I want to be. So, I think early I tried to, be everybody that I was influenced by. But I had to realize early that, ultimately you got to find a way to carve out, your own lane and make it what you want it to be. And but like I said, going and coaching at West Liberty, D2, limited resources, it gave me a big, big chance to ultimately find out who I wanted to be and how I wanted to coach. And I think it's helped me, especially along the way. And obviously, helped me enough to get an opportunity and a job at a great university here, like at Chattanooga, and having the success I've had here and, leading my room the way I have been. So, I think it's just ultimately, it's kind of like a self-reflection type of thing, man. I think every coach has their own style and their own way of doing things. And I think my whole, my biggest, attribution to that is just finding my way and ultimately just believing in it. And it's helped me, up until this point.
Biggest takeaway that you had in your years back in West Virginia, whenever you were coaching in the MEC at Concord and West Liberty? I know you coached at West Liberty longer than Concord, but what was your biggest takeaway coaching at the Division II level in the Mountain East Conference?
I would say, and some people will say this, it's funny that there's always like a big connection between that conference and WVU per se. A lot of coaches come from that conference and end up, at WVU at times within their career. And I think just ultimately knowing that, within that conference, there's times where you really got to truly understand how much, football means to you and how much you love the game of football. You from taking bus rides from West Liberty to Concord, going from, north or, the upper part of the state all the way down to the southern part of the state on a long bus ride, having to play, UNC Pembroke, taking a whole trip like that all the way down there on a bus and back and forth, little things like that, that you kind of don't think about. That's the kind of stuff that ultimately like gets you kind of like to understand, is this really what you want to do? But also, your love for the game and your love for the game in a conference like that, you'll have certain teams, man, where week in and week out, it can be a toss up. Even at West Liberty, I know we didn't have too much success, but we were in almost every game, that during the time period in which I coached there. And it just kind of ultimately just allows for you to be free and truly fall back in love with the game of football. I think Division II football, there's a lot of good players that do come out of that level. I can speak to or as a testament, man, I had Cam Rice there when I played, walked on at WVU, ended up playing for me at West Liberty for 2 years, ended up an All-American, and just finished up his career at Maryland, So it's needless to say, man, it's just a matter of how much you kind of want to get out of the experience. But I think it's a great experience nonetheless, man. Like, like I said, week in and week out, man, you're getting a great opportunity, playing in some good ball, playing some good competition, man. And you really just got to love the game, man. You really do. And I think that Mountain East Conference, man, helped me fully, like, fall in love with just this coaching aspect of it, too.
A couple of questions about your time in West Virginia University and playing football for the Mountaineers. I look at what you were able to achieve during your time in Morgantown. You ranked number 2 in the Mountaineer record book with 27.5 sacks and tackles for loss with 43.5. You hold the single game sack record with 4, which came in 2011 against Pitt in the backyard brawl. When you talk about your playing career, do you oftentimes, whenever you are coaching, do you oftentimes recall back to your time as a player to try and relate in a lot of ways with the players you're coaching nowadays?
Man, it's funny you asked that. That's actually a really good question. My room yesterday just put me on the spot and had me pull up my highlight film that's on YouTube, and hearing and seeing those guys going in here and, man, coach, you really good, man, you're really like that. It's funny. I'm probably as humble as they come. Even as a player, I was like that. I mean, you look at it, the two personalities, with me and a Bruce Irvin playing with each other. Bruce is, he's going to be loud. He's going to be, and I kind of just was the quiet assassin. And, it kind of rolled into my coaching career. I didn't talk about it much when I first started coaching because for me personally, I knew the way I wanted to come up in the coaching game. I wanted to really start from the bottom and make my way up. But I didn't want to lean on, putting myself out there that, I knew more than what I thought I did because I felt like as a coach, I just wanted to learn, schemes, things like that. So I just wanted to take it from a ground level. But do I lean into it? I definitely do. The guys who I get to coach year in and year out respect me so much for it. They always, coach, man, you were one of the better players at West. Oh man, you played with, you were good. So they love it, man. And sometimes you do have to use it to your advantage. I think a lot of players nowadays do respect coaches that have played the game. And when you play the game, it gives you a little bit of a different aspect or vantage point. When I'm teaching a kid how to take on a double team or how to take on a base block, reach block, whatever it may be. I'm speaking more so from my point of view rather than just, what I see on film or something that I might, just think it's supposed to be how it is. I'm speaking more so from the heart. So these guys, they definitely take a lot of stock into that. They respect it a lot. My guys, especially like, the guys I have this year in this room, man, they respect me a lot for it. But I do think it is funny how you just asked me that. And literally yesterday, we just kind of had like a whole thing where they saw me and now they're like, man, I didn't know half of them had never seen the highlight or some of them had never seen. So they're like, hold on, you were really like that? You were good? You were really like that? I was like, I mean, yeah, I was pretty good. So.
Final question for you here, and we're talking with Julian Miller, former defensive lineman for the Mountaineers between 2007 and 2011. Take me back to that 2011 contest against Pitt in the month of November. That was the last time up until just a few years ago, I think it was 2022, that West Virginia was going to play Pitt. So about a little over a decade it would have been between the 2011 contest and the first game back with the 4-game series between WVU and Pitt in the 2020s. Importance of that game. I know you were on the roster when Pitt defeated WVU 13-9 in Morgantown in 2007. You were redshirted that year. How personal of a game was that for you? Because I look at these stats, dude. Holy cow. Like, I'm literally looking at the stats right now. You had 12 total tackles, 9 solo of the 12, 4 sacks, as I mentioned earlier. And collectively as a team, you guys had 11 sacks, which still ranks second all-time by a defense in a single game in Mountaineer history. So how personal of a game was that 2011 contest against Pitt in the backyard brawl to you, considering what had happened just a few years ago in that 13-9 game?
So I'll take you back real quick before I go right into that. So you're right. I was there that night for that game. I know it's a game that we always say we don't talk about, we don't mention up there. But needless to say that being my redshirt freshman year, we win that game. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. We win that game. We're going to play Ohio State. Down in I believe what was it, New Orleans for the national championship. So that impact of that game and how I view Pitt for the rest of my time at WVU. I mean, it really set the tone. You flash forward to a year from that, I actually got my very first start as a Mountaineer, my redshirt freshman year versus Pitt. That year we went up there the next year. And I know we unfortunately lost that game too as well, but that was my very first start, as a Mountaineer. Obviously played a lot that freshman year. So, I took it upon myself to take those 2 years, reflect, especially when it came to that game, because it was always a special time of the year for me. And I'll tell you why here in a second. But, you look at the years after that, we start getting on a roll, win the next one. And then the one after that is the one they were ranked, I believe, top 10. And we were able to finish on that field goal. And it was an amazing feeling. But you look to that last year, that game, that was actually not only was it senior night, that was actually my birthday, November 25th. I'll never forget, man, 2011. And, I don't know if there was something, with the moon and something going on out there, but, obviously with it being my birthday, man, I wanted to show out. Not only did I want to show out, it was my last game there, in that stadium. and it was not only that, man, it was Pitt. It was Pitt, man. So, I think just everything, the build up to it, I don't get to tell too many people like the whole origin of the story and how it is. You go into that game, man, and we still needed some work to do to win the Big East, and we knew we needed that game. But like just a night game at Morgantown, during that week, and like you said, we knew at that point, the backyard brawl was going to be put on hold for some time. So we definitely didn't want to go out of that game, as losers. So we wanted to make sure we set a tone, made sure they remembered us, made sure that game, was put in the right perspective that it needed to be in. But, me personally, man, it meant so much to me. Like I said, senior night, my birthday, that game, that opponent, it just all came together, man. And the experience is it's amazing. I'll never forget it. But like, yeah, I wanted to give it my all, man, because I knew how much it meant and how much that game always means to us, when you're a Mountaineer.
Absolutely. Well, Julian, my friend, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you for the recollections and definitely the perspective of being a collegiate coach in today's day and age. So appreciate your time as always, and good luck to you guys in the mocks as you guys embark on the 2026 season.
Definitely, man. I appreciate you having me, man. And, let's go Mountaineers. Let's go Mocks, man. And wishing for both success for both teams for sure this year.
Absolutely. There he is, former defensive lineman Julian Miller. Up next, we're going to talk with Mitch Vingle, continuing along our preseason discussion leading into the September 5th contest between West Virginia and Coastal Carolina in Morgantown at Milan Puskar Stadium. Break the take. We're back after this.
Football season is here, and GoMart has your gold and blue playbook. All August long, follow our weekly plays for your shot at the ultimate WVU fan experience. Plus, GoMart Rewards members are in the end zone with triple points every Tuesday. Not suited up yet? Sign up now to start scoring. Don't get caught off sides. Get your entry in before we call the final whistle. Winners announced on The Rich Rodriguez Show on September 7th. Check out the app or go to gomart.com for details.
Each and every season tells the story of a community coming together. From the sidelines to the stands, Burke and Herbert Bank is proud to support the schools, students, coaches, athletes, and families who make our hometowns so special. As your local bank, we are honored to be part of the communities we serve. Best of luck this season from all of us at Burke and Herbert Bank. Member FDIC, equal housing lender, and proud to provide you with service beyond expectations.
It's that time of the episode again, and it is this week's edition of Vingle's Views as we chat with former Charles Gazette-Mail sports editor and WVU beat writer Mitch Vingle as we look forward to the second half of the season. In last week's episode with Mitch, we previewed and gave our prediction for the first half of West Virginia's schedule. Now, let's look at the second half of the schedule, and Mitch and I will give our predictions. And to this point, we're about the same entering the second half of the season, so it kind of seems like something's bound to change here as it normally does whenever he and I talk. So let's bring in Mitch Vingle now. And Mitch, welcome back, man. It seems like as we inch closer to September 5th, it seems like the football talk continues to increase.
Yeah, and it's great. I'm ready, and we were talking beforehand about getting ready for fantasy football and college football and diving into the Mountaineer opponents and everything. So yeah, it's great, man. I'm ready.
One fantasy football story for you. I think it was the year that Peyton Manning, one of the years that he was with the Broncos. It might have been the year that they won the Super Bowl when they beat the Panthers, but I had him and I had Demarius Thomas on my fantasy football team. Needless to say, elite 1-2 combo with Peyton Manning and Demarius Thomas. I mean, racked up points. I don't know if I finished undefeated or I had a couple of losses, but I had my receiver core that year was really good. So fantasy football is always a fun time. I always get really competitive when it comes to that.
Well, my thing is that I dragged my Joni into the league, and last year we were both in the finals. So it was me against her in the championship, and of course she won. So she's very competitive, though. It's like I think we're all competitive to a degree, but she's really competitive. If things don't go well, I'm the one that has to suffer. So I always hope that she has a good year.
No, I get that. I 100% get that.
But they say happy wife, happy life, right?
I guess so. I don't know. I don't have a wife, so I can't really second that notion. But we'll go with what you say, because if you have the experience and you guys have been married for a while, I'll lean on you with that.
There's your early tip, buddy.
Well, Mitch,
all righty. So,
as things won't get easier now. I mean, obviously, the second half of the season with our predictions, for me at least, got a little bit tricky. Not really trickier, but more difficult would probably be the correct way to say that. I think to this point, I was 4-2 with the 2 losses coming to Oklahoma State and Iowa State. So, just kind of give a rundown of where your record is at as we discuss and get ready to kick off our predictions for the second half of the season.
Yeah, I think we both ended up at 4-2 after the first half. You and I flip-flopped one of the games, but that's where we stand right now. So taking us to October 17, home Cincinnati. Scott Satterfield is squarely on the hot seat there after a 7-6 mark in 2025. They had a season-ending collapse of sorts. He's 15-22 at Cincy, and I hear some are chanting for Urban Meyer to swoop in and take over there. They have new offensive coordinators, and the question for them is, can J.C. French take the Bearcats' offense to the next level? He's had 26 career starts, 5,800 passing yards between Georgia Southern and Memphis. And then on the other side of the ball, Nate Woody takes over a defense with nowhere to go but up. They finished 2025 ranked 93rd in total defense and 108th against the run. I'll have to check with Brendan Sorsby on the odds that Cincinnati's ex-quarterback, but I'm betting on WVU here, 28-21.
What's funny is I was thinking about this on my drive into work today, and I thought to myself, who's going to be the first one to make the Brendan Sorsby comment? And as you just mentioned, I should have bet on just the field in general, because it was bound to happen. But nonetheless, no, I'm with you. I think WVU gets the job done in this matchup against Cincinnati to make it 5-2 on the season for the Mountaineers, for a lot of different reasons. And the statistical analysis, I'll lean with you, and I reside with you with that, because I took a different approach whenever I was looking at the schedule. And I also mentioned the Cincinnati game in my column of the 4 games to watch for WVU this season. And I look at it in this particular way, and you mentioned it just a second ago, the whole storyline with Scott Satterfield. I mean, he's one of the names, especially in the Big 12 Conference even. It seemed like him, Dave Aranda from Baylor, and then you kind of hear a little bit of trickling about Deion Sanders at Colorado. I don't know how valid that is, but the 2 names I hear consistently in the Big 12 for hot seats are Aranda from Baylor and Satterfield from Cincinnati. You look at Cincinnati's schedule, they open the season with 3 non-conference games against Boston College, Western Carolina, and Miami of Ohio. Okay, all due respect, Cincinnati starting 3-0. Move on. Now, here's where I start to align my storyline with Scott Satterfield. So Cincinnati opens conference play against Kansas State and Arizona before the October 17th matchup against West Virginia, okay? I'm high on Arizona, as I mentioned in the last episode. I'm also high on the fact that Kansas State's going to be really good this season, especially getting quarterback Avery Johnson back and having first-year head coach Colin Klein in the system as well. So I like Kansas State and Arizona to win against Cincinnati in the first 5 games of the season. So now you're putting Cincinnati at 3-2. Here's my prediction. Cincinnati will be without Scott Satterfield leading into that WVU game. Okay? Here's why.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Now that's a hot take.
Yeah, and I'll make my bet with that, and here's why. So, as I said, I'm assuming Cincinnati is losing to Kansas State and Arizona leading into the WVU matchup. I'm with you. They're now 3-3, 0-3 in conference play. So you're entering that October 17th matchup already down 2 games in conference play at 0-2 against K-State and Arizona. Tack on the West Virginia loss. Now you're 0-3. Mitch, I don't know if you know this, and you probably do, but if you look at the next games that Cincinnati has to play after West Virginia, you have games against Texas Tech, who is the favorite to win the Big 12, Utah, who people are high on and can finish right in the middle of the pack, if not higher, and Houston, who finished as strong as anybody in the country last season in the way that they played outside of that game against West Virginia. So if Cincinnati keeps Satterfield around after 6 games, he'll probably be gone after the next 3 after the West Virginia game. But I'm predicting that leading into the WVU game on October the 17th is whenever Satterfield will be gone. Because what they'll do is they'll assess it and they'll be like, okay, we lost the first 2. Now we're against West Virginia. And then after that, we have three straight games that are just going to be an absolute gauntlet. I think Satterfield is out before they play West Virginia. So I'm with you. I like that score. I'm going to probably go 14 points. I'm going to go 35-21 the final, West Virginia.
So you're saying go ahead and get a jump on the new hire, or go ahead and bring Urban Meyer in and get it started. Let him get acclimated to the team.
Yeah, sure.
I love that take. That's a great take.
Well, I'm glad someone finds it good because I was kind of skeptical at first, but I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to make this bed, I need to be able to sleep in it. So let's ruffle some feathers. Why don't we?
I got your back, buddy. I got your back.
Well, I appreciate that. So now we get the Cincinnati
game. And if
game.
it happens, I promise you, I will put it out there on social and give you kudos for that, for sure.
We'll have producer Sean make sure he clips it as well, because I know he'll be on it as well.
There you go.
We'll make national news. I'm just kidding. Anyway, so now West Virginia is 5-2, leading into the second half of the month of October, as they start a first of 2 games away from Milan Puskar Stadium with a 2-game trip out to Texas, 2 separate weekends. They'll play TCU first in Fort Worth on October the 24th before their bye week on the 31st, Halloween weekend. So, TCU, what do you see in that game?
I think it's a tough one for West Virginia. I mean, we all remember the TCU Cinderella run to the 2023 national championship game.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a down year, they went, I think, back-to-back 9-4, including an Alamo Bowl win over USC in 2025. It looks like the Horned Frogs are going through, I don't know what you call it, a quasi-transition season with the new offensive coordinator and quarterback. Kendall Briles is gone, and last year's quarterback, Josh Hoover, transferred to Indiana. So now they've got Harvard quarterback Jaden Craig, who threw for 2,800 yards, 25 touchdowns, 61.5 completion rate. He's now the man. They seem to have a rock-solid offensive line, though, and on defense, they return a bunch of starters. They have some questions at cornerback, but I don't think this sets up very well for West Virginia. So I'm going TCU 35-17 in Fort Worth.
I reside with you with this take. I do agree with you. So now we're both at 5-3, and I think more so for me, it's just I'm a big believer in momentum and how you can play with momentum. Okay, if you look at where West Virginia was through 7 games a season ago, we were, at least I was talking more so of the negative in regards to what has been going wrong, especially starting in conference play. I think whenever they started conference play last year against Kansas, and in that stretch of 4 or 5 straight losses, they had allowed 40 or more points in almost every single one of those contests. So now you look at the flip side of that to 2026, and now you're thinking, okay, what type of team are we going to be seeing? And to this point, into October 24th, when we're talking about this TCU game, we're both high on them. We're saying that they've won 5 of their first 7 games, including a neutral site win over Virginia. And then I mentioned in the last episode, I was predicting West Virginia to beat Virginia, then lose to Oklahoma State. Very similar scenario.
Yeah, I had them flipped.
Yeah.
I've had those 2 flipped. Okay.
Yeah. So now I'm kind of looking at it like, okay, it's a similar scenario as you are with Cincinnati. Not so much in the standpoint of where you would be with Virginia per se, because you're starting 3-0 leading into conference play compared to being 4-2 leading into the Cincinnati game. So I look at this as, okay, you've won, you beat Cincinnati, another regional foe. Now you're going on the road and to the state of Texas in Fort Worth to play the Horned Frogs. If you look at the series history between these two, West Virginia still has the advantage in Fort Worth, winning 4 of the 6 games against TCU. But, again, I'm with you. I think in a lot of different ways, this is a game where WVU's momentum will probably get the best of them. I hope not. But at the same time, this is a team that will have its longest trip to this point away from Morgantown, with the other game on the road coming against Iowa State. It'll be their second road conference game this season, with the other one being against Iowa State, as I just alluded to. So I'm with you. I think the gap will definitely be larger in this game, and it will favor TCU. So now we both have WVU now at 5-3, entering the bye week of Halloween weekend. Now to kick off the month of November, on November the 7th, WVU will go on the road to Lubbock and will take on preseason number 12 Texas Tech. And Mitch, I think I can probably speak for the both of us. I don't see much of a contest with this one, just because of the pieces that Texas Tech brings back, along with what they brought in. Obviously, the big thing will be the quarterback position, and I know that's been discussed with Joey McGuire and his crew already, just because of the whole Brendan Sorsby thing. But it seems like Hammond with their quarterback will probably be the way that they go. So I'll go ahead and just start this one off. I think Texas Tech will roll. I don't think it will be exactly like what happened last year in Morgantown, whenever they just shut out and walloped West Virginia 49-0. But I think it will be closer, but not that close. So I'm gonna take Texas Tech winning 38-17.
Wow, we're really aligned on this one. I think it is good that West Virginia gets that off week before meeting the Red Raiders. I mean, like you said, they're ranked 12th in the AP poll. I mean, I don't think they'll be as good as last season when they dominated. Remember, their calling card was defense, and Jacob Rodriguez is gone. I loved that kid. I loved watching him, as well as their top 2 pass rushers and a couple corners of their best corners are gone. And you mentioned Will Hammond at quarterback, but he's still an unknown, right? So you look at it, and we know that Tech is still spending all that oil money. They brought in 10 transfers who were full-time FBS starters last season, and it sets up as another rough game for the Mountaineers. I'm calling it 42-17.
Ooh, okay, I like it. Now we go to WVU's second to last home game of the regular season, with a contest against the Fighting Kansas Jayhawks in Morgantown on November the 14th. And so go back real quick to what I was just saying. So WVU beat Cincinnati in the first half of the month of October. Now they're 5-2 leading into the TCU game. And as I alluded to, we've already both mentioned losses to TCU and Texas Tech. I'm just going to go ahead and say this now. Kansas will be the last loss that the Mountaineers have in 2026. Not diminishing the fact they still have a home game against Houston, but I'm also very high on Houston as well, and I know we'll get to that here in a second. But I think this matchup on the 14th of November for West Virginia will be WVU's final win of the 2026 season. Now we're looking at 6-3. No, is that 6-3? 6-4, excuse me, with the win over Kansas. Now you still have 2 games left with a home and away against Houston and Utah. So I will take West Virginia over Kansas at home on November the 14th by a final score of 42-24.
Okay. Now I look at this, and I don't know, would West Virginia's off week have been better after the Texas Tech game or before the Texas Tech game? I went back and forth on that. The Mountaineers might be limping home for this Kansas game. I think the Jayhawks have more talent than, they have had more transfer help for Lance Leopold after going 5-7 last year. Cole Ballard, the redshirt junior, who's the son of Colts general manager Chris Ballard, has been battling Isaiah Mitchell at quarterback. And as I checked before we even did this podcast, and I think that's still undecided, that's key for them because their offense is ranked 63rd in scoring and 67th in total offense last season. And the defense finished 86th in total defense. They had 49 new commits, but 0 top 300 recruits. I don't know. I get a weird feel about this one. I think it might be closer than we think, but I'll give the nod to West Virginia like you. I'm not discounting a letdown, but I'm going WV 21-20.
Ooh, a little closer. Here's another thing I forgot to add on to what I was saying as well. WVU has now hypothetically lost its last 2 games against TCU and Texas Tech, according to our logic. You're entering the final 3 games of the regular season, with the other 2 games being against Houston and Utah, which we'll get to here in a second. Now, if you're sitting now 5-4, you're now thinking, okay, we got to win one of these final 3 games to become bowl eligible. And if I'm a player, well, I really don't want to say, if I'm someone that follows this as closely as what you and I are, I'm looking at this game and saying, okay, which of these 3 games is the most manageable to win? And obviously, we know WVU's historical perspective and context with true road games, and especially against conference foes. But we also know the flip side of that, too, is with WVU playing very well at home, especially since the turn of the decade. More wins at home than on the road. They'll come into this Kansas game thinking, okay, this to us feels like the most manageable, because in your next 2 as well are also preseason top 25 in Houston and Utah, with Utah being the higher ranked between the 2 at 21st and Houston being at 23. So if I'm West Virginia, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, this is the game that we need to win to solidify a spot at the dinner table to become bowl eligible. If we win another game in the next 2 against Houston or Utah, great. That just adds on to our resume. But at the same time, you're looking at this game and you're saying, this is the one. This is the one where our urgency has to be at an all-time high from our hypothetical perspective of being 5-4 and entering that November 14th contest against Kansas. So that to me is the other element of this contest against the Jayhawks. Is this is probably the game that makes or breaks you becoming bowl eligible. So that's where I reside with that.
Yeah. And remember, too, Jalen Daniels is gone from Kansas.
Thank God. He had West Virginia's number for a minute.
Exactly. So he's gone. So we both have West Virginia winning that.
So now in our hypothetical scenario or hypothetical season, West Virginia is now 6-4, leading into the final 2 contests of the regular season with preseason number 23, Houston, who, by the way, one of the hotter teams to end the 2025 season that actually finished in the AP and the college football playoff top 25 in the Houston Cougars, entering another season with Coach Willie Fritz at home against the Mountaineers on November the 21st. Mitch, I'll start with you. Where do you see this ending up?
Okay. Now, again, like you said, this is at home, so that helps West Virginia. Coming off a win, and as you mentioned, Houston begins the season ranked 23rd in the AP poll. I think that's some of that's a respect for Coach Willie Fritz. They have experience returning from last season after 10 wins. Quarterback Connor Wegman, I think is how you pronounce it, returns after throwing for 25 touchdowns and 11 on the ground. And they got a running back, Mekhi Hughes, who transferred in from Oregon. I know W had the big upset last season when Houston was number 21, but the Cougars may be gunning for a Big 12 title in late November, as you mentioned. And so I think West Virginia will put up a big fight, but I've got Houston 45-35.
I like where you're ending with that. I do. It's also ironic that you said that final score because that was actually the same final score. You said 45-35, right?
Yep.
So that was the exact same score that West Virginia had in last year's upset victory over Houston in Texas. So ironic in the sense, but just a little fun tidbit. No, I agree with you. I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, I am a momentum guy, but I'm also an emotional guy in a sense of how do you respond to a team on an annual basis? Do you have their number? Do they still have your number? How do you go about approaching that? And the way that Houston ended last season is going to be the exact same way that I'm predicting that they're going to carry over to this season. And when we spoke with Chris Vanini from The Athletic, I had also mentioned that Houston was going to be my dark horse for the 2026 season. And I will still lean and stay on that path because you look at their schedule, their toughest game up until the point that West Virginia plays Houston will be Texas Tech, and that's the third game of the season, and that's in Lubbock on a Friday night. So if you take that game out, okay, very, very easily could Houston be entering that game against West Virginia 9-1 with that lone loss being to Texas Tech. Okay, now you're talking them being arguably a top 3 team in the Big 12 Conference because I'm still thinking that BYU is going to be ahead of Houston. So Houston is playing with a ton of momentum because if you look at it, their first 2 games are against Oregon State and Southern before rattling off 7 consecutive victories entering the game in Morgantown on November the 21st. I think Houston, I'm with you. I think Houston wins by double digits, and I think that continues to solidify their spot potentially in playing in the Big 12 championship game come the month of December. So I think Houston wins the game. And now West Virginia is now 6-5, leading into its season finale against Utah. Also, historical context, this will be the first ever game between Houston and West Virginia in Morgantown. The prior 2 meetings came in Houston with WVU having the combined winning margin over Houston by +8. Last year was West Virginia winning by 10, and I'm not really going to go too into detail about the 2023 matchup because hopefully – not really hopefully, but if people remember the outcome of that game, we'll just leave it at that. Houston won by 2 for context. So I think Houston wins the game on the 21st, leading into West Virginia's final game of the regular season on Black Friday on November the 27th, a 9 p.m. kick in Utah, and will be on Fox between the Mountaineers and the Utes. Mitch, what do you think?
Okay. Yeah, your hope when you sit down looking at these games, right? You want to be as optimistic as possible, but realistic foremost. Going to Utah, they're ranked 21 to start the season. Morgan Scalley takes over after Kyle Whittingham went to Michigan. Now that could play into W's favor. But the Utes should have another explosive offense after averaging more than 40 points a game, finishing 11-2 last year. They made their bones rushing the ball, and I'd expect that again this season. If there was an area the Utes struggled in, it was against the run, which could, again, play into WVU's favor. If this was in Morgantown, I might call for the upset, but like the Houston game, Utah could be gunning for a Big 12 title at this point. I got to go Utah 31-21. I was thinking I might get the W Mountaineer win projection up to 7, but I guess I'm at 6-6, a bowl game. But that's where we're at.
It's funny how you and I align every once in a while, but. I'm with you, and as people that read my column at wvgazettemail.com, I too said 6-6. I think West Virginia's game against Utah will be a loss, obviously, to align with my prediction is 6-6. And similar scenario as I mentioned with Houston and the Cougars and Mountaineers meeting for the first time in Morgantown. It'll also be West Virginia's first ever meeting against Utah in Salt Lake City, playing the Utes. Obviously, they played each other at home last year, and then they had the 2 bowl games that were neutral site games. But this will also be the first time that West Virginia's ever went to Utah to play the Utes in a true road game. It'll also be West Virginia's second ever game in the state of Utah, with the other one being last year against BYU. So I'm not saying West Virginia is going to be complacent in this game by any means, because if Rich Rodriguez is the head coach, there's no shot that he's going to allow his team to be complacent. Now, I know that they're probably still thinking in the final 2 games against Houston and Utah, we still need to try and solidify a spot at the table for a bowl game. But I think up to this point, they've already solidified it. So they'll lose the game on Black Friday to Utah, leading into a bowl matchup against whomever in whichever bowl, because God forbid there's been so many new bowls added, and there's already so many bowls as is. So I think WU will end the regular season with a loss to Utah, and we'll get a bowl, and we'll be 6-6 entering the bowl game. So now we'll add a little bit of a twist on this. So it seems like we're both saying that WU is going to be bowl eligible. Now let's just kind of have a little fun with this next one. If WVU were to make a bowl, do the Mountaineers win the bowl game?
See, it's so screwy nowadays, right? Because how many kids are going to want to continue to play if it's not a college football playoff game? Is it worth it if you have a shot at the NFL, even if it's as a unsigned free agent? I don't know. It's the lower bowls have kind of lost their luster to me, and this trend has been going on for a while, and I don't know. I don't know if West Virginia will get a bowl that'll be attractive enough to the kids, to continue going, or hitting the transfer portal and getting that process started.
I get what you're saying. I do. I think the other side of it too is that if you look at the historical context of a Rich Rodriguez team, I know this is a little off topic, but if you look at what Rich Rodriguez has done in second seasons at different schools, he's averaging 7.75 wins in his second season at his different schools. We know what he did in his second year. He went from a 3-win season to a 9-win season in his second season at West Virginia. I'm not saying he's going to win 9 games by any means. However, I think this season, I think this is this team that he really enjoys being around. And I've even told people that dating back to whenever I was in Frisco for the Big 12 Media Days. And I could just sense that he was a lot happier than last season, just because, and I know sometimes people will watch his press conferences and be like, is he actually happy? And he's actually gone on record saying, I don't think I've ever been happy. That's one of my all-time favorite lines, by the way. But nonetheless, I think that this is the right team for him. And I think he's got the right guys in the locker room that could potentially stick around and compete for a bowl game, because a lot of those guys may end up staying. And all that does is that's just momentum carrying over to the next season. Plus, the other side of it too is that transfer portal window is not open yet. If they were to play a bowl game, because if they were to play a bowl game, that bowl game would be in the month of December, and the transfer portal window does not start until the national championship game the day after that Tuesday. So that is also of significance. I know sometimes kids can opt out and whatever. I get that. I'm not naive and not thinking that. But I do think there are the right guys in this locker room that would want to compete for a bowl game, just to say that they ended on a high note rather than just breaking even. Now, I know that's kind of like I kind of sound like a gambler at that point. Like, you never want to break even. You always want to end on a high note compared to the sports book or just even the casino in general. You always want to walk out with your chest out. But I think this is definitely the team that could compete for a bowl game and win the bowl game, which also would mean, if you go on DraftKings Sportsbook, you can also bet WVU's over-under on wins this season, and they give you like 3 separate options. I think it's like 4.5, 5.5, 6.5. I know several people saying, I don't think it's quite 6.5. I think it's more 5.5. And I'm like, well, I kind of see that, and I like that play just because it kind of goes with what we're saying. But I do think WVU will end the 2026 season 7-6 with a bowl victory in the mix as well. So that to me is where I lie as we sit just about a week and a half away from game 1 against Coastal Carolina.
And one last thing to dovetail kind of off of what you were saying. I think the next step in the Rich Rodriguez era, the second one, is to maintain or retain the better players, which has not happened, recently. The very best players, they have to lock those guys down and not let them go to Missouri or Miami or wherever. That's the next step. Can you make this place desirable to stay and profitable, obviously, these days? But that's the next thing. Obviously, you're going to lose some kids, but don't lose the good ones.
And I think a lot of that, too, and we'll end on this, I think a lot of that, too, is also just where West Virginia is at financially now compared to where they were in the early portion of this decade. When we spoke with Ren Baker, just listening to what he had to say, it seems to me, and I'm projecting, I'm not confirming this, I'm not saying that Ren said this, but it seems like from a financial perspective, it seems like West Virginia is in a better, more suitable financial portfolio now than what they were 3 years ago or 5 years ago, for that matter. So I get what you're saying. I also agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, I like the current state of where West Virginia athletics are at from a monetary perspective. So I get it, but at the same time, I'm also encouraged by what I've heard and seen that you mix all that together, I think West Virginia will be suited for the better than the worse entering the 27 season. So that's just me. I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I get it, but I'm optimistic.
That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see, because I've talked to Ren Baker in the past, and he said, financially also they're in the second tier. They're not Texas Tech, but they're in the second tier there in football. And so, but I want to see it.
Yeah. You just want to see the ROI. How's the ROI going to be? Mm-hmm. Like, if you can retain a Kevin Brown, you can retain one of the quarterbacks, so they're both sophomores. That would be good. That'd be encouraging. Amari Latimer, if you can retain him. I mean, a lot of these big name guys, it's going to be key, because obviously you're still going to have a massive high school roster turnover as well. But then you're also going to spend some money on some portal guys to complement the younger guys and those middle guys as well, to blend it all together, which is what they're doing this season. So it'll make for a fun discussion throughout the course of the season, and I'm glad that we did this, because it kind of gives us like a game by game breakdown of what to expect from West Virginia from September the 5th all the way up to its Black Friday matchup against Utah. So interesting conversation, to say the least. I do think we're aligned with our prediction, which is very rare and very surprising. But it seems like our futuristic perspective is also parallel, and that also is scary as well, because now we're also agreeing on that. So yeah, I like the discussion. I think it was good. So Mitch, as always, we appreciate your time. Good discussion, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right, buddy. Have a good week.
Yep, you too. There he is, former Charleston Gazette-Mail sports editor and WVU beat writer Mitch Vingle. Special thanks to Mitch for joining us for his weekly hit of Vingle's Views. Also, again, special thanks to Julian Miller, former WVU defensive lineman, for joining us as he enters another season with the Chattanooga Mocs. So be sure to keep up to date with everything going on with him. Stay up to date with all the stories and coverage going on with the Mountaineers by going to our website, wvgazettemail.com.
You have been listening to the All Ears Podcast, powered by HD Media.